If everything had gone perfectly, if all the information that the controllers had gone smoothly to FAA command centers, if all the information the FAA command centers had gone smoothly to the military, if the Vice President's authorization to shoot down intruding aircraft had been communicated to the pilots, would it have been physically possible for the pilots, the military pilots, to have shot down the airplane that hit the first tower, the airplane that hit the second tower, and the airplane that hit the Pentagon? Assuming everything had gone perfectly, everybody was perfectly prepared, focused inward, scrambled, armed, all the authorization there, all the information there, would it have been physically possible for the military to have intercepted those three aircraft before they completed their terrible mission?
Sir, our modeling, which we've shared with the staff, reflects that giving the situation that you've outlined, which we think is a situation that exists today because of the fixes, the remedies put in place, we would be able to shoot down all three aircraft, all four aircraft.
Would.
Okay. Commissioner Field.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, in preparation for this hearing, I went back and I read the staff interviews, in particular General Eberhart and General Arnold's interviews with our staff, and we thank you all for cooperating with our staff as you have. But the question I have is that I was disturbed when I read them at things you said about the state of readiness of NORAD on November 11th. And I would hope that you would share those with us again today, and let's discuss what steps were taken, how can we help, and what recommendations would you have. I was particularly, General Arnold, concerned about your statements about that really we only had token air sovereignty. And so I would appreciate your comments, please.
Sir, General Myers referenced an ongoing debate after the implosion of the Soviet Union and the fall of the wall. And that centered on, was NORAD a Cold War relic? A Cold War relic that we did not need because the Soviet Union was no longer our enemy, and a much different Russia than the Soviet Union we faced for decades. And so again, there was great debate during the 90s, and we came very close to having 0 airplanes on alert during this debate, and that was one of the options, and one of the options that many times was an option that almost went to the end game. So thank goodness cooler heads prevailed, and in many cases this came from our National Guard, our Air National Guard, and we did have some aircraft on alert that day. And the ability then, as General Myers said, based on actionable intelligence, based on a change in the threat, to then increase the number of airplanes on alert, increase the number of alert sites across North America, from Alaska through Canada to the continental United States. And it was, again, a question of dollars. How much was it going to cost, even though the airplanes were already there, to have them on alert, have them armed, have them not available to go to fight Iraq in the first war, not have them available in Bosnia, Kosovo, etc. There was this debate because there was an attendant cost. The good news is that we had the airplanes on alert that day, and we were able to be flexible and put more aircraft on alert. The bad news is that we only had 14 airplanes on alert, 7 alert sites. But I must caution you, Commissioner, that even if I look at the height of the Cold War, and I looked at our posture in the height of the Cold War, and where we had airplanes on alert, given the notification we had that day, we still had a time distance problem where we would not have been able to respond to these threats. Atlantic City is the only alert site that we had in the vicinity of the threats during the height of the Cold War that we did not have that day. And Atlantic City, given the timelines we had, would not have been able to get there on time.
General?
I was on the side of the argument, as General Eberhart remembers, that because I've been in the air defense business all my life, I was concerned about our air defense. But when you're making priorities, you have to decide where you're going to spend your money. I think the Hart-Rudman study had indicated that the biggest threat to the United States in the aftermath of the demise of the Soviet Union was from rogues, rogue nation, or terrorists. Our focus then was, what can we do to thwart a terrorist attack from outside the borders? Again, this focus that we had before. And we were involved in that. We were working with NORAD. We were working with General Myers, later with General Eberhart, and trying to be able to bring in radars that we didn't have available to us at all times, be able to bring them into the system. And it was an ACTD, Advanced Concept Technology demonstration that we had, and it was ongoing and funded. So we were focused on the terrorist threat, but we certainly weren't focused on the terrorist threat in the way that it came down on 9/11.
But is the situation better today, or is it worse, or is it the same? Or?
Sir, the situation is much better. Obviously, you don't have anyone questioning whether or not we should have aircraft on alert. You don't have anyone questioning whether or not we should have an integrated air defense system here in the nation's capital and other places like the G8. There's no question in terms of priorities, and then obviously we have the material and the procedural solutions and changes that we've outlined that are in our statement. And if we have a concern, it's the concern that the chairman outlined briefly, and that is the future of these FAA radars. We've netted those all together now, added almost 100 radars so that we have that visibility in our command centers and NORAD. We can't let that atrophy. And then we have to look for technology over time that allows us to even have better situation awareness of our airspace and the approaches to this nation and over this nation. And that's where I believe we really need to concentrate. But I also, I feel compelled to mention that NORAD's not the right way to work this problem. It is the force of last resort. If you use us, if we have to be used, if we have to take action, it takes a bad situation from getting worse, because everybody on that airplane will die. So, I mean, this is a stopgap final measure. We have to take it. We have to be prepared. But where we really need to focus is destroying these terrorist networks, not allowing them into our country. Don't allow them into our airports. Don't allow them on our aircraft. And if they get on our aircraft, don't let them take control of the airplane. That's where we must focus.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I really need to re-ask my question because I think we've gotten two different answers from General Eberhart. I want to be fair to him and have the public understand, if I might. General, I think you may have misunderstood my question because you prefaced your answer with, if we were postured then as we're postured now. And then in response to another question, you said we could, the timeline, given the time and distance, you could not have shot down the plane. So let me re-ask it to give you a fair chance. Assuming we were postured as we were then, forget now, and assuming that the timelines in the staff statement number 17 are correct, as I think we all now concede they are, would it have been physically possible, if everything had gone right in terms of communication and of information and communication of orders, would it still physically have been possible for the military pilots to have shot down either the plane that hit the first World Trade Tower, the plane that hit the second World Trade Tower, or the plane that hit the Pentagon?
Sir, I'm sorry if I misunderstood your question. I assumed in the preface to your question, you assumed that FAA told us as soon as they knew.
Right?
And if that is the case, yes, we could shoot down the airplanes.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Commissioner Romer.
The difference in the answers is that in answering the next question, I assumed that they told us when they actually told us on 9/11.